The funny thing about this is I found a bunch of articles. You can find hundreds of articles on this stuff now, but there's like an escalating tone to all of them, which culminates in the Hollywood Reporter article that calls it racist threats. And it gets more and more hyperbolic.
Right. That's the same language that they were using with Kenobi when people had an issue with the performance of Moses Ingram as Reva. They didn't think she did the character justice. They just didn't like her acting. And I think that was completely a fair criticism. She has an extremely blank expression throughout the series, and we had problems with how she did action scenes.
Maybe she'd be an IRS auditor.
Yeah, that'd be better.
I mean,
like in a role,
the dialogue, I'll grant, was terrible in Kenobi.
Yes.
So she didn't have a lot to work with. But also, it's totally fair to criticize her acting chops, and that's what people were doing. But they preempted racist hatred toward her before the show was even out and prepped her for it, almost like groomed her into the response to it before it even existed, and completely astroturfed it.
The idea is that
in a way that it shows that they're actually the racist ones. And her response to it was so insane to me, because she said, if you have talking androids and aliens in the show, you better have people of color. If you are paying attention to the words that are coming out of your mouth, you are pooling in people of color with aliens.
Yeah, and robots.
It made me think of...
Do you know how that sounds? Or
well, they're like... the other one said, like, there can't be, like, other races on Middle Earth. It doesn't make any sense. I said, well, the same thing could be said about Wakanda. That's not a real place.
Yeah, it literally
Black
doesn't
Panther.
exist.
But would it make sense to change it there? No, it wouldn't. You'd leave it the same way. So this other article from Film... What is this? Film Total. Says, the House of Dragon premiere beat The Rings of Power by a considerable margin. Now, they touted a very large number of like 25 million for the Amazon Prime premiere, which we said would be astroturfed, and there's no way to really prove those numbers in any sense.
Now we're counting it by households.
Yes. So for this one, it says 4.8 million households watched House of the Dragon, as opposed to, what was it, 2.6.
You mean total?
Yeah, households just that have that Samba TV has the ability to track. Okay. So that would be smart TVs. That's not the same thing as the amount of people that watched it total.
Well, from that same researcher, I saw The Rings of Power was watched by 1.8 million U.S. households in the first 4 days, but House of the Dragon had 2.6 million households in just their premiere night.
Yes, and also another thing
which is staggering.
That's relevant here is that what's going to matter is they lost a lot of people between episode 1 and episode 2.
Yeah, the retention of viewership is
like
way better for House of the Dragon.
1 out of 4 left Rings of Power just between episodes 1 and 2, so you can assume those people are not coming back.
And even who is coming back to the 3rd episode, which is coming out tonight?
Yeah, which we're going to watch, and we're going to
watch and review it because you guys have asked us to do it on your behalf.
And I would like to think that we've been fairly balanced in that I love to crap all over how badly they've marketed this garbage, like the garbage marketing, but still
that doesn't mean you have to hate the story itself.
So the other story, but before this one was the story about them talking about they reference Moses Ingram and what happened with Ewan McGregor there, but then they get into this stuff with they following their footsteps with by casting Lenny Henry, Sophia Namvidi. I think it's Namvidi. I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
I apologize if it's wrong.
Ishmael
Cruz Cordova as a hobbit, a dwarf, and an elf, respectively, despite the clear depictions of these characters found in J.R.R. Tolkien's works. Nevertheless, the actors were then antagonistic towards the fan base. Namvidi led the charge at San Diego Comic-Con in multiple media appearances, repeating a clearly canned message. She says, "We are redressing the balance within the film and television industry, this franchise, and I hope a lot of other franchises moving forward." She would also indicate that the show is an alteration of Tolkien's work to be part of creating accessibility for generations to come, for new generations. This is their version of Tolkien. This is what my daughter will see of Tolkien's work. Oof. That upsets me.
That's terrifying.
And not the books?
And not the books, yeah.
And this same actress in the interview with all of the female cast members that we talked about, I think it was last week, she said she believes she's righting a wrong, not only in the Lord of the Rings franchise, but in the fantasy genre as a whole. They're creating a balance that was absent before.
Also, I want to point out that I liked her in the show. Oddly enough,
it's so unfair to her own performance to have people instead evaluate you on your political opinions. You're coloring everyone's view of what you actually did for the show.
So
before it's out.
The other one was Steve Toussaint, who said the same similar type of thing about House of the Dragon, where he said that they're happy with a dragon, white hair and violet colored eyes, but a rich black guy is beyond the pale. But that's like the extent of what I've seen. I haven't paid as close of attention to the House of the Dragon, but I want to look at it through the eyes of like a normie, right? Who's not super invested. If your goal is to reach the regular audience, right? The people who aren't doing this for a living or aren't super invested in these franchises, you want to look at what media and what messaging is reaching them. This is the extent of what I saw as somebody who was less invested in House of the Dragon. So that's less to contend with as far as people getting upset by your work. And the quality of House of the Dragon has been objectively better.
But also the Game of Thrones franchise has less history to draw upon and a newer audience. The author is still alive and supports it. I believe that if Tolkien were alive, he would hate this.
They would hate him.
I mean, he wouldn't have lost ownership of his franchise in the first place if he were alive.
Honestly.
But his estate is allowing this, I believe, in dishonor of his memory.
Yeah.
And as we know, this is all nothing new whatsoever. I have this other article. It says, The Boys actress Erin Moriarty, the latest celebrity to complain about toxic fans. All I can think is, like, how easy would it be to just not say anything?
It would be easy.
Like,
you're
but
right.
they revel in feeling like they're fighting against the system.
So they turned it into a hashtag I stand with Starlight, the betrayal of Erin Moriarty by the Boys fans. As it turns out, you can dedicate an entire season of a television show to exploring how the toxicity of masculinity crushes and controls women, and seemingly a majority of the audience will still fail to employ the lessons learned, or worse, not have recognized that there was a message at all. Nobody wants your messages in this garbage.
Gag me.
The show succeeds because it's fun to watch, not because people want to read into your messaging.
This is a misunderstanding of the same thing we were talking about yesterday, the intent behind art.
Yes.
Why do they want to be evaluated on the intent behind their art rather than the output?
Because they know it's not good. That's what I thought.
I mean, is it partially because...
But people loved The Boys.
That's what I'm saying. It's extremely popular. Like, then you're just ruining it. Like what you said earlier, like they went out to create one type of stereotype in the show, and then people ended up loving it, and then they're mad about it.
Yeah, what they wanted to do was villainize. I mean, I didn't watch the show, but I think that a lot of politically homeless or right-leaning people enjoyed The Boys for the message they took away from it, which was independent of the intent of the showrunners.
Right.
The showrunners hate that the show they created is getting interpreted by people they believe are less than human.
That's also a really interesting thing to talk about, is like a lot of them do have a problem with, it's kind of like when they talk about the Punisher logo, and they don't want people using that logo because they think you don't get to control what your art means to other people.
Once it's out there, once you've sold it.
Yeah, you don't get the right to control. I mean, you can even argue that even if you didn't sell it, you don't have a right to decide what it means to the people that watch your art or consume your art.
Now you're getting into intellectual property territory,
yes,
which we know is dangerous water. But I will say that, like, the Pepe the Frog guy, he tried to take it back or whatever. I feel like once you create art, you need to just let it go, and then whatever happens, happens.
This is like with the Punisher logo. It was not designed. The guy who created it was not necessarily like super right-leaning. You know, he's a comic book artist. Of course,
right.
You know what this has turned into? It's an attack on the intent of the consumers in consuming the art.
Yep.
It's not even about the intent of the artist anymore. It's saying you like this show or this movie or this franchise or this character for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
It's presuming your reasons for liking something. It's like as ridiculous as going to someone who enjoys the Bible and saying it's because you like crucifixion.
What?
You you would support them killing Jesus. That's why you like the Bible. It's as
Thank you.
it's as out of left field as
I
that.
think that's a good comparison.
So Moriarty went on to chime in, adding, "I do feel." These are like I just remember, like when you read this, you have to remember that this is I don't know if like what the pay scale is for Amazon shows. I do understand that people who make movies are on a different pay scale than a lot of people working on streaming shows. But I just want you to think about, picture this being read, but I want you to picture it in an actual ivory tower.
Okay.
As she's reading this,
I'm picturing it.
she
Okay,
goes.
cool.
She was quick to chime in. I do feel silenced. I do feel dehumanized. I do feel paralyzed. I've put blood, sweat, and tears into this role over and over and over again. I've grown up in this character's shoes. Emphasis on grown up. We change and evolve mentally and physically. Only she hasn't been silent. And then the article goes on and says, only she hasn't been silenced. Otherwise, she wouldn't be saying what she's saying.
Exactly.
They love
Thank
She has an enormous platform.
Yes.
Ridiculous.
And she's using it to always say, my pain and my trauma is always more exquisite and authentic than that of the viewer who is interpreting this work toward their own life and experience.
You kind of have to actually picture her, maybe not an ivory tower, but definitely like with her nose in the air as she says this out loud.
I can see it. I feel like she's jumping on the bandwagon with this because she sees how she probably realizes that her chance at victimhood is getting away from her because, for example, the Rings of Power people are already complaining about racism. She realizes she can't complain about racism.
That's what-
she gotta
yeah.
do something else.
Rings of Power cast slams racist threats against performers. Middle Earth is not.
Threats.
So threats.
They're
like-
escalating this
That's right.
and gaslighting the audience.
and notice they never post the actual. When they posted
There's
the
no
Moses,
proof.
the Moses Ingram ones were like the most tepid. Like if you've never been on the that might be bad if you've literally never been on the internet a day in your life.
They said that Moses Ingram was a diversity hire, which is seen as an attack in and of itself. But then they
is it
escalate the language of
true?
the headlines to say that she has been threatened.
Yep.
As if
Correct.
any actionable or real threat, or even any not actionable or serious threat was made to her. I didn't see anything like that on social media.
And-
if anything, they were trying to stoke that flame or like bring it out of people when it hadn't happened yet.
Yep. So a 1.8 score for Lord of the Rings on Metacritic. Oof.
Yeah.
What?
Not good.
And like I said, it doesn't bother me. The show's fine. The character I hate the most, I'm not even really reading a lot about. I don't know. I know Morfydd Clark or whatever her name is said a few things that were kind of annoying, but for the most part,
Sure.
she just kind of Queen slayed it up, and I just hate the character of Galadriel.
Yeah.
Well, the whole cast did that behind
so-
the scenes, so they're sabotaging themselves. I think that's kind of the story recently is Hollywood keeps sabotaging itself.
And we're
when
gonna
it's
talk-
not, you said it's not rocket science.
No, it's not.
To create something that people like and stick with.
Yep.
Right. It's actually pretty simple.
I want
Just
to
go
also
and do that.
picture the idea that they do exactly what they've done. They make the show exactly the way they have. They don't change any of it, but they just don't speak out when people say this stuff.
Thank you.
It would actually go away faster because you're not feeding the. This is like when people.
This is like internet behavior 101.
It's like when people
don't
send me.
respond to haters
Because-
if you have any.
Right.
And don't make up that you have them when you don't.
Yeah, like I have the one dude who just he hates my guts and he posts on everything. I never respond because there's no point. There's no point in feeding into it because it's what they want, and all
Yeah.
that turns into is a chain or a thread of you guys going back and forth, and nobody really wins. If they had just allowed the show to exist on its own merits, whether you like the show or not, it would be getting a lot more leeway. Like House of the Dragon is getting far more leeway because they're just not hating on their fans quite as much.
They have to make everything a war.
Or maybe like House of the Dragons. Like, look, if you guys, can you guys just be a shit show for right now while we and let us get settled in, and then we'll be a crapshoot next season.
That's probably why they're laying low for right now. I wanted to say I saw Joe Rogan put something on his Instagram about the House of the Dragon, and I was like, wow, because Joe Rogan, in my mind, symbolizes like the everyman. He's like the
Mm.
normal person. He's just watching TV. He enjoys what he enjoys. He likes positive stuff, which I think is great, very necessary. But I was like, if you've caught Joe Rogan's eye and he approves of what you're doing, you're gonna be fine. And if all you have to do is not complain about racism, and you're automatically going to be better than the Rings of Power.
Well,
They've lowered the bar.
I would
You
say-
you gotta love them writing a whole letter to the fan base on Twitter.
This is right out of the Kathleen Kennedy and Star Wars playbook to do the exact same thing. They did this exact same thing with all the new Star Wars stuff.
They say, we stand in solidarity with our cast. Hashtag you are all welcome here. Then they spoke on the man himself. J.R.R. Tolkien created a world which, by definition, is multicultural. A world in which free peoples from different races and cultures join together in fellowship to defeat the forces of evil.
It's true.
Rings of Power reflects that. Our world has never been all white. Fantasy has never been all white. Middle Earth is not all white.
What's interesting about that is because she also said that fantasy that actually contradicts what the actress said, where she
Right,
said that
they don't even know what they're arguing anymore. And they say BIPOC belong in Middle Earth and they are here to stay. Finally, all our love and fellowship go to the fans supporting us, especially fans of color who are themselves being attacked simply for existing in this
What?
fandom.
False.
We see you, your bravery and endless creativity, your cosplays, fan cams, fan art, and insights make this community a richer place and remind us of our purpose. You are valid, you are loved, and you belong.
gosh.
You are an integral part of the Lord of the Rings family. Thanks for having our backs.
all you have to do is
Guys.
make that exact
You're
same.
valid.
I'm actually going to say that they could do that. All they have to do is remove the contentious parts at the beginning and remove the
That you're being attacked.
remove that, and all you have to say is we see you, your bravery and endless creativity, your cosplays. Say that.
Just
but don't
thank the
mention,
fans and shut up.
Yeah, how about that?
Don't segregate it down to specific fans. Keep the message positive. Let the reward benefit you by. If just bringing positive energy into a room is enough to help, then why not do that?
It's so simple to do.
Yes.
Like, they don't seem to understand it. They really think that this is the way forward. They think this is marketing. And I think that you're correct that this is a war. This is not about movies anymore. This is blatantly about cultural messaging and trying to tear everything down and remake it in their own image. Like, good for them. They've actually found a goal they're moving toward. Instead of just destroying everything, they're actually going to try to make something to take its place, which I never thought they would get around to doing. They're very bad at it because they have no clear vision, but that's what they're trying to do.
I disagree
But
with
it's
that.
all
I think
derivative.
I think they have fantastic vision and they have endless desire to move their message forward. I don't think
they're
that
moving forward. Where are they going?
They don't have
Where
any
are they going?
creativity.
I mean, where are you coming from? Are you saying that the fantasy genre has always been toxic, has always been racist and exclusionary?
Yep.
Or are you going to argue that the fantasy genre has always been multicultural, has always been diverse, and there's just this faction in this one fan base that's fighting against that, but it's always who we've been and what we stand for.
They're just saying slogans.
Right.
They
They're
don't
not
know
actually
what
talking.
they're even saying.
They're saying
They don't know the official narrative.
everything that they're speaking is something you read on like a sign at a
all
protest.
platitudes.
It's
It-
all
it
platitudes.
really
and,
is.
and me and Mary harp a lot on the idea that I hate buzzwords more than anything in the entire world. I think that it actually turns your brain off to constantly speak in buzzwords. To the point where it actually disassociates you from what you're saying. Meaning, like
It's
you
an
may,
abuse of language.
Yes, exactly, and I think that's one of the strongest wars we're fighting right now is the war of language.
100%.
The constant changing of what words mean, shrouding the definitions of words in a bunch of, not mystery, but you're trying to muddy the waters. So you could talk to somebody about the same thing, say the same thing, and not even be talking about the exact same issue.
Right.
And
That's
that's
how they
by
win.
design.
Yeah.
And that's by design.
And I don't think that they have a clear vision because in my experience from watching this cultural shift, it just appears that they're in the destruction mode and they really have nothing positive to replace it with.
I think it's a mixture of both negativity, about a negative outlook on how to approach these things, while taking a cause that's generically a good idea, which is like we should all get along and we should
Sure.
all like those are all good things, but they're applying it in an extremely not abusive way, but in an extremely volatile way without realizing that it affects other people.
I think they do realize it. I think they don't care. I think that's part of their destruction mode.
Depends
I think
on who
it's
we're talking
causing
about.
the violence and the turbulence, and in all of that chaos, quietly installing your new regime over everything.
What would that look like, do you think, though? Because I sense that there is just not a lot there. Like, these are the people who are scared to order pizza and make doctor's appointments.
I mean, they're foot soldiers, yes.
I know there are
Useful
two different
idiots.
There are two different
Yeah.
levels of people. There are people who know what's going on, and there are just the useful idiots. I feel like a lot of these actors and actresses, and I will continue to refer to them as such, are just foot soldiers. They don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, I actually like the weirdos on the internet doing this stuff. They have less to gain, so I actually believe that they're probably more true believers. The actors and
Right,
the actresses are in
exactly.
it for the money
Yeah.
and the status.
At least they have a clear,
It's-
like,
That's
hard
what I
to
meant when I say
tell.
that they have a clear. I kind of always fall back on the idea that it's your HR departments and it's your
middle management.
It's your middle management that are the
Yeah.
ones that put the stuff forward. It's somebody in a cubicle who said this is the way. Tim talks about that. It's like they one day like a focus group was done and they're like, this is the way we want to go,
Right.
and then you just go that way without really knowing what that means.
Exactly.
And the company that they're working for is so large. It's like when I made the comment "too big to fail" that they can spin this whatever way they want. So it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
to
you're
to
right.
revisit the letter they wrote, though, they say Middle Earth was always multicultural, and they bring together different races and nations together to defeat evil. That should not suggest that there isn't constant strife and war in Middle Earth. Like, their whole angle for Rings of Power is to show the history behind the fact that Lord of the Rings, thousands of years later, is almost telling a post-apocalyptic story. It's not sunshine and rainbows and holding
Right.
hands in this fantasy world. Otherwise, you would have, if that were true, you would have no plot.
Right.
And, you know, if anything, this franchise and the books especially are meant to show the complexities and the evil, like, that tempts the characters you're supposed to sympathize with. The Ring,
yeah.
like, for instance, like, why does the Ring have power? It's
Right.
the fact that the good guys even can fall to it.
You could also make the argument that this speaks more to the power and the superiority of the storytelling for House of the Dragon, that they made a good enough story that people don't want to talk about the other stuff. They want to talk about the actual show.
I will say I think that's what we need. We
Yeah.
need real shows that, like, draw the attention from this stupid horse and pony show over
To the
here.
point where you don't
Pony
need to
show.
read that stuff because you actually want to watch.
Right.
You could argue that the Boys one, it's like, as much as I find that topic relevant, people aren't really going to think about that. They're going to go watch the show because they like the show. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.